Former State Department spokeswoman Morgan Ortagus had her turn co-hosting The View this week, and when given the opportunity to question Democratic Representative and House Intel Chair Adam Schiff, she didn't hold back. Ortagus pressed Schiff on his promotion of the now infamous Steele Dossier, which concluded that Russia and former President Trump colluded to influence the 2016 election.
You've been really prolific over the past few years being the head of the Intel Committee, and you defended, promoted, you even read into the congressional record the Steele Dossier. And we know last week the main source of the dossier was indicted by the FBI for lying about most of the key claims in that dossier. Do you have any reflections on your role in promoting this to the American people?
Well, first of all, whoever lied to the FBI or lied to Christopher Steele should be prosecuted, and they are. And unlike in the Trump administration, if they're convicted, they should go to jail, not be pardoned. So Donald Trump pardoned Roger Stone for lying. He pardoned Michael Flynn for lying. If people lied to the FBI, they should go to jail. But at the beginning of the Russia investigation, I said that any allegations should be investigated. We couldn't have known, for example, people were lying to Christopher Steele. So it was proper to investigate them. And let's not forget what we learned in that investigation. We learned that the Trump campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was giving internal polling data, campaign polling data, to Russian intelligence while Russian intelligence was helping the Trump campaign.
And to be clear, he was fired halfway through the campaign.
Well, he may have been fired, but the effort to get Russian help continued, and even beyond the effort to get Russian help.
But you may have helped spread Russian disinformation yourself for years by promoting this. I think that's what Republicans and what people who entrusted you as the Intel Committee chair are so confused about your culpability in all of this.
Well, I completely disagree with your premise. It's one thing to say allegations should be investigated, and they were. It's another to say that we should have foreseen in advance that some people were lying to Christopher Steele, which is impossible, of course, to do. But let's not use that as a smokescreen to somehow shield Donald Trump's culpability for inviting Russia to help him in the election, which they did, for trying to coerce Ukraine into helping him in the next election, which he did, into inciting an insurrection, which he did. None of that is undercut. None of that serious misconduct is in any way diminished by the fact that people lied to Christopher Steele.
No, I think just your credibility is.
Team Rising is here to weigh in. Michael Starr Hopkins is a Democratic strategist and Senior Vice President of Firehouse Strategies. Emily Jashinsky is the Federalist's culture editor. Glad to have both of you here for this one.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
So, Emily, how would you have handled that if you were in her seat?
Exactly the way she did it. I don't think she could have done that better. She teed the question up perfectly by asking him about how he read the dossier into the record. And she ended it perfectly as well. That was sort of like a verbal WWE. It was, and you know, it's what's notable is that it's coming from The View, not from any of these newspapers that won Pulitzer Prizes, not for their Russia hoax investigations that have turned out to be thin and not worthy of Pulitzer Prizes. This is not even coming from a journalist. This is coming from somebody who used to be a State Department spokeswoman, from a PR person. It's outrageous that the first time Schiff has been made to like squirm and answering these questions is on The View from a non-journalist. And the last thing I'll add is when he says we couldn't have known people were lying to Christopher Steele, and that is his single defense of treating the dossier like a credible document, it all falls apart. That is everything you need to know.
Yeah, journalist Glenn Greenwald also pointed this out on Twitter, saying it's notable that Adam Schiff, who appears on every CNN, MSNBC, and Sunday morning network news program as often as possible, just had his first truly adversarial questioning about his pathological Russiagate lies, not on any of those networks, but from Morgan Ortagus on The View. So, Michael, what's your take? Are liberals, Democrats, mainstream media figures of those networks, when are they going to own up to the fact that there was a lot of bad information, a lot of now what we know to be lies told about the sort of Russia collusion narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a conversation we all have to have, because on one hand, the information that was given to Christopher Steele, some of it was untrue, and a lot of us led with that information. On the other hand, if you look at the behavior of Trump and the Trump campaign, there was a lot of behavior towards people like constant Klementin, the Russian person that we now know is kind of a foreign spy-ish involved with the intelligence that we gave the polling data to. I mean, there was a lot of behavior that leans into the information that we saw. And so, look, I think that is the job of the news media to really dive into this and figure out what was true, what wasn't true. And the fact that everything has gotten so politicized, I think that comes from Democrats and Republicans. We never really were able to wade into this and figure out kind of what at its essence was reality and what was just bias.
And Michael, has there been any reflection in kind of Democratic strategists and Democratic operative circles about going too overboard with claims before they were verified? Or is the polarized nature of media kind of immunizing them from accountability? In other words, MSNBC and CNN aren't going to really come after them for this, so in some ways they could just kind of tweet through it, so to speak.
Listen, I got to say, and I don't mean this in a self-serving way, I'm one of the few Democratic strategists that will go on Fox, MSNBC, CNN, and really kind of make the rounds in terms of being able to make the arguments. I think for most Democrats, it's going to be really hard to be able to justify the hardline defense. And, I was one of those people when the report first came out that really leaned into it. And I'm perfectly fine saying that there are areas where I 100% could have gotten it wrong. And the more that we delve into this, I think the more we're going to find out. I think that's how we get better at this, by just being able to say, hey, maybe I got that part wrong. And I know as a Democratic strategist, I 100% am open to that.
Yeah, and it's one thing, obviously, for media figures to get this wrong, but Adam Schiff is, is a very important government official on the intelligence, in the world of intelligence. He's someone sort of who is supposedly broadly trusted with a mandate to evaluate threats, law enforcement, what's going on, etc. Emily, what does it mean to have this figure just utterly deservedly lose credibility, lose the trust of millions of Americans, and then he didn't even come close to apologizing for it. He was defiant about it.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go with this. It's fascinating to me that the Democratic Party does not want to have any accountability for Adam Schiff over his role in this. So so the media was getting stories because, and running them because people were placing trust in Adam Schiff. This is the chair of the Intel Committee. He said he's seen definitive proof of Russian collusion. He read the dossier into the record. A lot of the credibility of this actually is downstream of the fact that media placed some credibility in Adam Schiff. Now, they should have placed credibility in people like Devin Nunes, who were, it should have been, okay, this is what Adam Schiff is saying, and this is what Devin Nunes is saying. And that's what their stories should do, is bring both sides in and let people judge for themselves and not just put credibility into one side. But the Democratic Party, Adam Schiff should be run out the door. He is an embarrassment. It's not just about the brand. It's not just about the politics of it. It's obviously he's wildly unqualified for this position, but he should be run out the door by Democrats. He should be, but there will be no accountability for him because a lot of people bought what he was selling, and that's it's an indictment on the party.
Yeah, and Emily, one of the casualties here is that this was such a dumpster fire that it has thoroughly discredited kind of the entire idea of Russian influence in foreign elections and Russian influence in the U.S. elections, which then makes it impossible for us to have a kind of normal conversation about what the U.S. ought to do to protect its election from foreign actors who want to interfere in it. It is not a new thing in the world. This is a centuries-old tradition of countries, monkeying with the internal dynamics and the internal politics of rival countries. This is a very normal thing. Russia does not just single the United States out. France, UK, you name it. It's part of their foreign policy. But because the media went so overboard, you can't even talk about that now without sounding like a crazy conspiracy nut. So how is
boy who cried wolf problem?
Right, exactly. But there are wolves.
Yeah.
Right? And the sheep were actually that. How that story ends with all the sheep getting eaten.
Was that how it ends? My mom would never let me get to that part.
You heard it. Yeah. You were just asleep by that time. Yeah. So, Emily, how's the right handling this? Are they taking a look at Russia's meddling in elections around the world in a serious way, or are they saying, you know what, we can just destroy Democrats with this issue now, so let's just do that instead?
Well, I think it's what you were saying in that, it's difficult to actually get to that conversation when there's still been no accountability and there has still been no, real mainstream conversation outside, Eric Wemple, about what happened with the collusion hoax. Rachel Maddow is still doubling down. You've got Adam Schiff trotting these lines out in The View about how we couldn't have known people were lying to Christopher Steele. It's outrageous. And so when you can't get past that, I don't it makes the conversations after that, the sort of secondary conversations, almost impossible to have because they're still tied up in everything else, and people don't know who to trust. They don't know what's right and what's wrong. And that's I think to the extent that there's election interference and the right is interested in talking about it, the more we see that comes out of China, the more I think we'll see the right particularly be interested in this issue. That's one way to sort of raise everybody's radar to set it off. So, but in terms of Russia, it's just nobody can have that conversation in good faith right now because it's so tangled.
Right. Who could have known that anonymous Russian intel connected officials might be lying to a partisan DNC researcher? Who could ever have speculated like that? Emily, Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
And we will have more Rising right after this.